"Sign it," the old man said, sliding the document across the table. "And your mother keeps her house. Your family's debt disappears. Tonight." Amelia Carter stared at the paper. A marriage contract. His name at the top. Hers at the bottom. 1 year. No love. No promises. She was 26 years old. He was 70. And he was the most dangerous man in the city. Her hand was shaking when she picked up the pen, but she signed it anyway. If this story already has you hooked, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Now let's go. The morning it all began, Amelia Carter was on her knees. Not in prayer, not in grief. She was scrubbing a bathroom floor at 2 in the morning in a downtown office building. Her back aching, her knees sore through the thin fabric of her work pants, her hands raw from bleach. She had been working since 6 that morning, 9 hours at the clinic, checking patient files, sorting medications, answering phones for a doctor who never once thanked her. Then 4 more hours here cleaning floors and emptying trash cans and pretending she was invisible. She was used to being invisible. What she was not used to was the sound of footsteps in a building that was supposed to be empty. Amelia stood up slowly. 3 men in dark suits were standing in the hallway. Not security guards, not janitors. Men who wore expensive shoes and had eyes that never moved the way normal people's eyes moved. The one in the middle stepped forward. Amelia Carter. She tightened her grip on the mop handle. "Who's asking?" "Mr. Valenti sends his regards." The man reached into his jacket and produced a white envelope. "He would like to meet with you, tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Amelia did not reach for the envelope. "I don't know anyone named Valenti." "Your father did." The words hit her like a slap across the face. She took the envelope. She didn't sleep that night. She sat at the small kitchen table in her mother's house. The house that was one missed payment away from being taken, and she opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single card, an address, a time, and 3 words written in precise, careful handwriting. "Come alone, please." The word please was what scared her most. People like Leonardo Valenti didn't say please. They didn't need to. Her mother Rosa was awake when the sun came up. She shuffled into the kitchen in her worn slippers, already moving slower than she had a month ago. The doctor said her heart was weakening. Said she needed medication that cost more than Amelia made in 2 weeks. "You didn't sleep," Rosa said. "I'm fine." "Amelia." "Mom, I'm fine." Rosa sat down across from her daughter and looked at the card on the table. She didn't touch it. She didn't ask about it. But her eyes told Amelia that she already knew something was wrong. "Whatever it is," Rosa said quietly, "we'll figure it out together." Amelia picked up the card and slid it into her pocket. "I know, Mom." She lied. She had no intention of involving her mother in whatever this was. The address led to a restaurant that wasn't open to the public. There were no signs on the door. No menus in the window. 2 men stood outside in suits that didn't quite hide what was underneath them. And when Amelia approached, they stepped aside without a word, as if they'd been told exactly what she looked like. That detail unnerved her more than anything else. Inside the restaurant was dim and quiet, and smelled of cedar and something old and expensive she couldn't name. A single table was set near the back. White cloth. 2 chairs. A glass of water on each side. And Leonardo Valenti. He looked exactly like the photographs she'd found online at 3 in the morning, photographs that were mostly from business events and charity galas, always in the background, always watching. 70 years old. Silver-haired. Lean in the way of a man who had never been soft, not even once. His hands were folded on the table. His eyes found her the moment she walked through the door. He did not stand. He said, "Thank you for coming." Amelia walked to the table and sat down without being invited. "You sent men to my job at 2 in the morning, she said. That wasn't an invitation. Something shifted in his expression. It wasn't a smile. It was something quieter than that. "Fair point," he said. "I want to know what this is about." "Your father." Her jaw tightened. "My father is dead." "I know." He said it without flinching. "He's been dead for 3 years. And in those 3 years you've been working 2 jobs to pay off a debt that was never yours to begin with. How do you know about—" "I know about everything, Miss Carter." He said it calmly, not as a threat, as a statement of fact. "I know about the clinic. I know about the night cleaning. I know about your mother's heart condition. I know that the bank sent its second notice last Tuesday. I know that the men who came to your house last month were not polite about it. Amelia went very still. If this is a threat, it is the opposite of a threat. He unfolded his hands and laid them flat on the table. A gesture of openness or something meant to look like it. I want to help you. She laughed. It wasn't a warm sound. Men like you don't help people like me. You're right, he said. I don't as a general rule. He paused. This is not a general rule situation. He reached beneath the table and placed a document in front of her. Amelia stared at it for a long moment without touching it. It was a legal document. She could see that much. Typed cleanly, multiple pages with signatures waiting at the bottom of the last page. What is this? A marriage contract, Leonardo said. The silence that followed was so complete, she could hear her own heartbeat. I'm sorry. 1 year, he said. A legal marriage. You would live in my home. You would carry my name. You would attend certain events, meet certain people, participate in certain appearances. Nothing more than that. At the end of 1 year, we would divorce quietly, and you would leave with your family's debt fully cleared, all $400,000, your mother's medical expenses covered for the next 5 years, and a sum of money that would allow you to build the life you actually want. Amelia stood up. I'm leaving. Please sit down. I'm not going to... Amelia. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Something in the quality of it stopped her mid-step. I am not asking you to do anything that would dishonor you. I am not asking for anything inappropriate. I am asking for 1 year of your life in exchange for saving the rest of it. She turned around. She looked at him. She hated that he looked sincere. Why me, she said. For the first time, something in his expression shifted into something she couldn't read. That is a longer answer, he said. Sit down and I'll give it to you. Slowly she sat. My family is watching me, he said. My nephew, my daughter. Various people within my organization who believe that a man my age no longer has the right to lead. He said it without bitterness, the way someone states weather. There are certain things that would stabilize my position. A marriage is one of them. Not because I want a wife I had 1 year ago, and I will not pretend this is anything like that, but because certain powerful people respond to symbols, and a man with a wife is seen differently than a man alone. So you need a prop, Amelia said flatly. I need someone I can trust, he said. That is different. You don't know me. I know more about you than you realize. That's not the same as trust. He looked at her steadily. You've been working 2 jobs since you were 23 years old. You have never missed a payment. You have never asked anyone for charity. When the collectors came to your mother's house, you stood in the doorway and told them they would have to come through you first. He paused. That tells me something. Amelia looked at the table. She hated that he was right. She hated that she felt seen. This is insane, she said. Yes, he agreed. You're 44 years older than me. 44 years and approximately 3 months, he said. Yes, people will think. People will think whatever they wish, he said. People always do. The question is what you think. She looked at the contract again. $400,000. Her mother's medication. 5 years. A chance at a real life. Her hands were steady when she picked it up this time. Her voice was not. If I do this, she said, and you break any of these terms, any of them I walk. No argument, no renegotiation. Agreed. I want it added to the contract. He nodded once and picked up his pen. She signed it 30 minutes later, walking out of that restaurant. Amelia Carter told herself she was making a calculated decision. She told herself she was in control. She told herself that 1 year was nothing that she had survived. Harder things that she knew exactly what she was walking into. Every single thing she told herself was wrong. The mansion was on the north side of the city, behind a gate that required 3 separate codes to open. When the car pulled through and she saw the house for the first time, Amelia understood in a way she hadn't before what the word wealth actually meant. Not nice furniture, not a big house, but a world so sealed off from ordinary life that people inside it could forget ordinary life existed. She almost told the driver to turn around. Instead, she got out of the car. A woman named Helen met her at the front door. 60s. Gray hair. The posture of someone who had worked for powerful people long enough to be unimpressed by all of them. She showed Amelia to a room on the 2nd floor, her room she was told, and explained the schedule, the staff, the meals, the events on the calendar for the coming week. And Mr. Valenti? Amelia asked. He will meet with you this evening, Helen said. He has a standing rule for new members of the household. He gives everyone 1 week to settle before he expects anything. Amelia looked around the room. He's done this before. Helen's expression didn't change. I'll leave you to unpack, she said. The first dinner was quiet. 2 people at a long table. Staff that moved in and out without making sound. Food. Amelia didn't recognize and couldn't pronounce. She ate it anyway. Leonardo said almost nothing during the meal. He read a document beside his plate, occasionally making notes in the margin, and when he spoke, it was to ask her a single question. Do you have everything you need? Yes. If something is wrong with the room or the schedule, tell Helen. Okay. I went back to his document. She stared at him. Can I ask you something? She said. He looked up. You live in a house with 12 rooms and a staff of 8 people, she said. You sit alone at a table big enough for 20. You work through dinner. She set down her fork. Is this what your life actually looks like? Or is this for my benefit? I was quiet for a moment. This is what my life looks like, he said. That's a sad life. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. Yes, he said. I went back to his document. But Amelia had the strange, unsettling feeling that no one had said that to him in a very long time. The rest of the first week was a study in tension she hadn't expected. Not tension between them. Tension coming from everyone else. She felt it the moment she walked through any room with other people in it. The staff who went carefully neutral when she passed the security men who tracked her movement without looking at her. The 2 people who arrived on Wednesday evening and didn't bother to hide how they felt at all. Marco Valenti was Leonardo's nephew, 42 years old, broad-shouldered with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of being told he mattered. He walked into the living room, saw Amelia sitting with a cup of coffee, and stopped as if he'd stepped on something. You're the wife, he said. Amelia Carter, she said. And you are Marco Valenti. He said his last name like it was a conclusion to an argument. Leonardo's nephew. And the person who will be running this family when he's no longer able to. Nice to meet you, Amelia said pleasantly. His eyes moved over her with the precision of someone calculating the cost of something. How old are you? 26. And what exactly did you do before you became my uncle's charity case? Amelia took a slow sip of her coffee. I was a medical assistant, she said. And a night janitor. What did you do before you became your uncle's shadow? The air in the room went so tight, she could feel it pressing against her skin. Marco took 1 step toward her. You don't know where you are, he said quietly. I know exactly where I am, she said. I'm in my husband's house, which means, technically, this is also my house. So unless you have an appointment, you're a guest. Marco stared at her for a long, silent moment. Then he turned and walked out without another word. Amelia set down her coffee. Her hand was trembling slightly. But she hadn't blinked. Victoria Valenti was a different kind of problem. Where Marco was aggressive, Victoria was precise. Leonardo's only daughter. 50 years old, elegant, with a way of looking at Amelia that made her feel like something that had been tracked in from outside. She arrived the following afternoon and asked to speak with Amelia privately. They sat in the garden. My father tells me this is a business arrangement, Victoria said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her slacks. That's correct. Then I'll be direct. Whatever he's promised you, money, security, a future, it comes from this family. It belongs to this family. When this year is over, you'll leave. And nothing you might believe you've earned during that time will change that. Amelia looked at her steadily. I appreciate your honesty, she said. Here's mine. I didn't come here for your money. I came here because your father made an agreement, and I intend to honor it. What I do or don't earn during that time is between him and me. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. You're not what I expected, she said. People keep telling me that, Amelia said. She stood up and went back inside. It was on the 8th day that she first saw a different side of Leonardo Valenti. She had woken early habit. She couldn't shake and gone down to the kitchen to make coffee the way she liked it, because the staff made it too strong, and she hadn't figured out yet how to say so without feeling like a burden. Leonardo was already there. I was standing at the window in a plain shirt, no jacket, no tie, with a phone pressed to his ear, speaking quietly. When he saw her, he ended the call without ceremony and set the phone on the counter. You're up early, he said. So are you. She started making coffee. He watched her for a moment. Helen said you've been skipping the breakfast she sets out. The portions are too large. Tell her that. I don't want to be difficult. You called Marco's bluff on his 3rd sentence, Leonardo said. You told my daughter to her face that your financial arrangement was none of her business. But you won't ask the cook for smaller portions. She turned to look at him. I know which battles matter, she said. For the first time in her presence, Leonardo Valenti came very close to smiling. Sit down, he said. I'll make the coffee. She sat. He made it himself, plain no ceremony, and set a cup in front of her. Then he sat across from her at the kitchen table. Not the long dining table with its careful distances, but the small table near the window where the early morning light came through gray and quiet. Why aren't you sleeping? He asked. Why aren't you? A pause. This house makes noise at night, he said. Even when it's empty. 40 years of decisions, she said quietly. I imagine that makes a lot of noise. He looked at her. You're not what I expected either, he said. What did you expect? Someone grateful, he said. Someone careful. Someone who would keep their head down and wait for the year to end. And instead you got me. And instead I got you. He looked at his coffee. I'm not sure yet whether that's better or worse. Give it a week, she said. This time he did smile. It was small, brief, like sunlight through a crack in a wall. But she saw it, and something in her chest shifted in a way she wasn't ready for. 2 weeks into the arrangement, Leonardo began including her. Not in everything. Not in the parts that were dangerous or complicated, or that she didn't need to know. But in the ordinary business of his life, the phone calls with lawyers, the visits from accountants, the meetings with men who ran the legitimate side of his empire. She sat in the back of those meetings at first, listening, not speaking. But one afternoon, a man in an expensive suit was presenting a development proposal, and he kept using a clause that was designed to funnel money in a direction the rest of the contract didn't reflect. Amelia had spent months reading debt contracts with her father, trying to understand how they worked, how people got trapped in them. She raised her hand. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. Clause 14, she said. The revenue participation structure doesn't match the expense-sharing model in Clause 7. Someone would take a significant loss while appearing to profit. The room went quiet. The man in the expensive suit turned very slightly pale. Leonardo looked at the contract. Then he looked at her. She's right, he said. He canceled the deal that afternoon, and that night at dinner, he asked her how she knew. My father used to bring contracts home, she said. He'd spread them on the kitchen table and try to understand them. He said nobody ever explained these things to people like us, so we had to teach ourselves. She paused. I was trying to protect us. He wasn't fast enough. Leonardo was quiet for a moment. How is a good man, he said. The words were careful, specific. Amelia set down her fork. You knew him, she said, not a question. Leonardo picked up his glass. We've all known people, he said. He changed the subject, but Amelia filed the moment away. Something about the way he said it, the care in it, like it was a weight he'd been carrying for a long time. The night that changed everything came at the end of the 3rd week. Amelia had been going through some of the family's legal documentation. Leonardo had asked her to flag anything that seemed inconsistent treating her. She realized less like a wife, and more like someone he was slowly training when she found a file that wasn't business. It was buried between 2 binders of corporate records, a plain manila folder with no label. She opened it. Inside were photographs. Old ones. A man she didn't recognize at first, younger, standing with a group of other men outside a building she didn't recognize. A newspaper clipping from 30 years ago. And a document official with seals and signatures that had her father's name printed at the top. Daniel Carter, accused of embezzlement, tried and convicted, sentenced. Her father had never gone to prison. So the dates were wrong. Or the case was dismissed. Or, she flipped to the last page. Case dismissed. Not because he was innocent. The document didn't say that. It said dismissed due to cooperation of the primary witness. Amelia's hands went cold. She looked at the photograph again. And this time, she recognized the man beside her father. 40 years younger, thinner, without the silver hair. But the eyes were the same. Leonardo Valenti. She sat in that office for a long time. When she finally moved, she walked upstairs and knocked on his study door. He opened it. One look at her face and he said nothing. Just stepped back to let her in. She held up the photograph. You knew my father, she said. Not casually. You knew him. Leonardo looked at the photograph. I didn't deny it. Sit down, he said. Tell me the truth, she said. Right now. Or I walk out of this house tonight and you can find someone else to be your symbol. I was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down himself slowly and he said, Your father saved my life. The room seemed to contract around those 5 words. 30 years ago, he said, there was a man inside my organization who wanted me gone. He built a case, paid people to testify, constructed evidence. He paused. The only person who went to the police and told the truth at enormous risk to himself with nothing to gain was Daniel Carter. Amelia couldn't speak. How was nobody? Leonardo said. He had no connection to my world, no reason to care what happened to me. But he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to see, and instead of looking away, he told the truth. He folded his hands. They went after him afterward, quietly, destroyed his credit, his reputation, manufactured a case against him that was eventually dismissed, but damaged him enough that he could never quite rebuild. That debt, Amelia said slowly, the $400,000, was manufactured, Leonardo said quietly. The men who destroyed your father created it years later, to finish the job. Amelia felt the floor shift beneath her. You knew, she said. You knew the whole time. Yes, and you didn't tell me. I needed to see who you were first. She stood up. You needed to see... She stopped, breathed, started again. My mother is losing her house over a debt that was fabricated. My father died believing he'd failed us. And you needed to see who I was first. Amelia, do not, she said, say my name like you know me. She walked to the door. The people who built that debt, Leonardo said quietly, are still powerful. If you walk out of here tonight, they'll see it. They're already watching this house. They know you're here. The moment you stop being my wife, you stop being protected. She stopped. Her hand was on the door. Every part of her wanted to keep walking. But she knew in the part of herself that had survived everything her life had thrown at her that he wasn't lying. She turned around. How long have you been planning this? She said. 3 years, he said, since your father died. She looked at him, at the man who had watched her from a distance for 3 years, who had calculated every move, who had chosen her not because she was convenient, but because she was her father's daughter. Because he had owed a debt he didn't know how to pay. You should have told me from the beginning, she said. Yes, he said, I should have. It was the simplest admission she'd ever heard from him. She crossed the room and sat back down. Tell me everything, she said. From the beginning, all of it. He looked at her for a long moment. And then Leonardo Valenti, who had not told the whole truth to another person in 30 years, began to speak. Outside the window, the city hummed and moved and breathed. Inside the study, 2 people sat across from each other. A young woman who had spent her life paying for other people's mistakes, and an old man who had spent his life carrying a debt he didn't know how to repay. And something between them shifted into something neither one had planned for. Not love. Not yet. But the first fragile thread of trust. And in a world built entirely on betrayal that was more dangerous than anything either of them had faced before. He talked for 2 hours. Amelia didn't interrupt him once. She sat in that chair with her hands folded in her lap, and she listened to Leonardo Valenti unravel 30 years of a story she had never known, existed a story that had shaped every single thing about her life, without her ever being given the chance to understand it. Her father, Daniel Carter, had been a low-level accountant working contract jobs for various businesses in the city. He wasn't connected to anything, wasn't part of any world. He was just a man who worked hard, came home on time, and genuinely believed that doing the right thing was its own protection. He was wrong. 30 years ago, Daniel Carter had witnessed a meeting he wasn't supposed to see. A meeting between a man named Salvatore Greco, one of the most powerful figures in the city's underground, and 2 police captains who were supposed to be investigating him. Instead of investigating Greco, they were taking his money, taking his instructions, taking the list of names he handed them, names of people Greco wanted discredited, arrested, or worse. One of those names was Leonardo Valenti. Daniel had been in the wrong building at the wrong time, delivering documents to an office 2 floors above where the meeting was taking place. He'd taken the wrong stairwell. He'd seen exactly what he shouldn't have. And instead of walking away, instead of doing what every rational self-preserving instinct would have told him to do, Daniel Carter went to the only honest detective he could find and told him everything. His testimony was enough. The case against Leonardo was dropped. 2 of the 3 officers involved were suspended. Greco's operation was disrupted briefly, in the way powerful operations get disrupted, inconvenienced, but not destroyed. And Daniel Carter went home believing it was over. It was not over. They waited 18 months, Leonardo said. That's how Greco operated. He was patient. He never moved immediately because he understood that immediate retaliation was traceable. He looked at his hands. By the time they came after your father, nobody was looking at them anymore. What followed was quiet and methodical and nearly impossible to fight. A debt manufactured through a shell company tied to a creditor who didn't officially exist. A credit file poisoned with accounts Daniel had never opened. A professional reputation shredded through anonymous complaints to licensing boards, to employers, to anyone who would listen. By the time Daniel Carter understood what was happening to him, it had already happened. He came to me, Leonardo said, once, about 12 years ago. Amelia went very still. He told me Greco's people were pressing again, that the debt had transferred to new collectors, harder men less patient. He didn't ask me for money. Leonardo paused. He asked me if I knew who was still running it, if I could find out who had taken over Greco's operation after Greco died. And did you? Amelia said. I tried, he said. But by then the operation had fragmented, spread out. The people behind it were deeper underground, better hidden. I couldn't reach them fast enough. He was quiet for a moment. Your father died before I found the answer. The room held its silence. Amelia pressed her palms flat against her knees. He never told us, she said. Any of it. He never said a word. He was trying to protect you. He died thinking he'd failed us. I know. He spent 20 years being punished for doing the right thing, and he died believing it was his fault. Her voice didn't crack. It just went very quiet. And that quiet was harder to listen to than any amount of crying. Leonardo looked at her steadily. What I'm trying to do now, he said, is finish what I should have finished years ago. The people who manufactured that debt, who destroyed your father's name, they are still operating. They are still connected to power. And they are in this city right now, untouched. Who are they? Amelia said. That, Leonardo said, is what I need you to help me find out. She looked at him. I thought you needed a wife for appearances. I need both, he said. The appearances are real. My position inside this world is being challenged, and a marriage stabilizes it. But the reason I chose you specifically... He stopped, chose his next words carefully. There are people who will talk to you that will never talk to me. People who knew your father. People who were peripheral to what happened. You can ask questions I can't ask. Move in spaces I can't enter. Amelia stood up and walked to the window. She stared out at nothing. You want me to be an informant, she said. I want you to be a partner, he said. Those aren't the same thing. No, he said. They're not. She turned around. If I do this, she said, we do it my way. I decide what I'm comfortable with. I decide what lines I won't cross. And the moment you go around me or make a decision that affects me without telling me first, it's done. Everything. Do you understand? Leonardo looked at her. Yes, he said. She held out her hand. He shook it. It was the strangest, most formal handshake two people in a marriage had ever exchanged. But it was real. And in that house, real was rarer than gold. The next morning, everything looked the same and felt completely different. Amelia came downstairs to find Leonardo already in his study, and she went in without knocking, which she could tell mildly surprised him, even though he didn't show it. She poured herself coffee. She sat across from his desk. She said, "Tell me about Greco's operation. Who inherited it?" He looked at her over the top of his reading glasses. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she said. "Tell me about Greco's operation." He almost smiled. He set down his reading glasses and began. Over the following week, she absorbed everything. Names, dates, organizational structures, the way money moved through legitimate businesses to clean itself. The way power passed from one generation of criminal enterprise to the next, like a surname. Leonardo was precise and thorough, and spoke to her without condescension, which she appreciated more than she expected to. She returned that energy. She asked smart questions. She caught inconsistencies. She remembered everything. "You have your father's mind," Leonardo said one evening. "He taught me to read contracts," she said. "He taught me numbers don't lie even when people do." He was right. He was right about a lot of things. She looked at him. He just wasn't right about people being basically good. Leonardo was quiet. "Most aren't," he said. "No," she agreed. "But enough are." That's what he missed. He thought it was most. But enough is enough. Leonardo considered that for a moment. "That's a better philosophy than the one I've operated with," he said. "What's yours?" "Trust nobody, verify everything, and keep the exit close." "How's that working out for you?" He looked around the study at the 12-room house with its 8 silent staff members and its long empty dining table and its absence of anything that looked like genuine warmth. "Poorly," he said. "She didn't say I told you so, but she thought it." The first real test came 10 days later. Marco Valenti called a family meeting, not through Leonardo. He called it around. Leonardo invited Victoria, invited 3 of the family's senior associates, and informed Leonardo's assistant that the meeting would take place at the estate on Saturday afternoon. Leonardo said nothing when he was told, but Amelia watched his hands, and they tightened briefly on the folder he was holding. "He's staging something," she said. "Yes." "What does he want?" "To demonstrate that I can be managed," Leonardo said. "That the people around me are loyal to the family, not to me personally. That the marriage—" He paused. "That you are a liability." Amelia set down her coffee. "Then we don't let him demonstrate it." "There is very little I can do to—" "Not you," she said. "We." He looked at her. She looked back. "Tell me who's coming to this meeting," she said. "Tell me what each of them wants. And trust me to handle the parts that involve me." A long pause. "Amelia." "I handled Marco on day 3, she said. "I handled Victoria on day 5. I've been reading your legal documents and catching fraud for 2 weeks. Do you trust me or not?" He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. It came out like something he'd had to excavate from somewhere deep. "Then trust me," she said. "Tell me everything about Saturday." Saturday came gray and tense. The men who arrived were not men. Amelia had met before, but she knew their type: men who measured respect in the language of deference and submission, who read a room in the first 30 seconds and made their decisions about who mattered based on body language alone. Amelia dressed carefully. Not in anything that tried too hard. Not in anything that apologized. She wore a dark blazer over a simple top, and she wore it like someone who had made decisions in rooms like this before, which she hadn't. But she understood that confidence was 90% posture, and the other 10% was refusing to look away first. She sat beside Leonardo at the table. Marco sat across from them. He opened pleasantly enough. Family well-being. Business conditions. The usual performance of concern that everyone in the room understood was a prelude. Then he said, "I think we need to talk about the current management structure." Leonardo said nothing. He folded his hands. "There are concerns," Marco said, looking around at the associates, inviting them to corroborate without requiring them to commit. "About certain decisions, about judgment, about, and I say this with respect, Uncle, about whether recent changes in the household have introduced instability." He looked at Amelia. She looked back at him. "If you have concerns about me," she said pleasantly, "you can address them to me directly. I'm sitting right here." Marco smiled. It didn't touch his eyes. "Mrs. Valenti," he said, "this is a family matter." "I'm family," she said. "Legally documented. You're welcome to check." "You've been married 3 weeks." "Marco," she said, leaning forward slightly. "I've spent the last 2 weeks reviewing your family's legal exposure across 4 different business holdings. I found 3 clauses in active contracts that would have cost this family significant money if they'd gone unnoticed. I flagged them, they were corrected, and nobody made a presentation about it." She tilted her head. "Now you'd like to make a presentation about stability. I'm curious which of us is actually the liability here." The room went quiet. One of the associates' older man said nothing. watched everything, looked at Leonardo. Leonardo looked at Amelia. Then he looked at Marco. "Is there anything else?" Leonardo said. Marco's jaw was tight. "This isn't finished," he said quietly. "It is for today," Leonardo said. After the others left. After the cars pulled out of the gate, and the house went quiet again. Leonardo walked into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water and stood at the counter for a long moment. Amelia leaned against the doorframe. "You knew I was going to do that," she said. "I hoped," he said. "I didn't know." "Did it cause more problems than it solved?" He considered. The man who sat at the far end of the table, older, gray suit, never spoke. "I noticed him," she said. "His name is Ferrucci. He's been with the family for 25 years. He has never respected Marco and has been looking for evidence that I'm still capable of surrounding myself with competent people." Leonardo set down the glass. "He texted me 11 minutes after the meeting ended." "What did he say?" Leonardo turned to look at her. "He said, 'Where did you find her?'" Amelia exhaled slowly. "Good," she said. "Good." Leonardo agreed. They stood in that kitchen in the quiet aftermath, and something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, not anything. That simple, but the particular electricity of two people who have discovered they operate well together, who have surprised each other, who are starting cautiously, tentatively, to rely on each other in the way that matters more than any formal agreement on paper. Amelia looked away first. "I want to contact someone," she said. "From my father's past. A woman he used to work with. I think she might know something about the Greco connection. It could be dangerous." "Everything about this situation is dangerous," she said. "I'd rather be moving than waiting." He looked at her for a moment. "Reach out through Helen," he said. "She'll know how to do it without drawing attention." "Thank you." She started to leave. "Amelia." She stopped. "What you did today," he said. "Your father would have—" He stopped, started again. "He would have been proud." She kept her back to him for just a moment, because she needed a second before she could turn around without her face giving anything away. When she turned, she was composed. "I know," she said quietly, and she walked out. The woman's name was Patricia Hale. She had worked alongside Daniel Carter at 2 different firms 25 years ago. She was 60 now, retired, living in the east part of the city. She agreed to meet Amelia at a coffee shop on neutral ground, and when Amelia walked in, Patricia looked at her across the room, the way people look at someone they recognize from a dream, familiar and strange at the same time. "You look exactly like him," Patricia said. "Everyone says that," Amelia said. She sat down. "Thank you for meeting me." "I almost didn't." Patricia wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "When your message came, I was scared. I haven't thought about those days in a long time, or I've tried not to." "I need to know what you remember about the period after he testified," Amelia said. "The 18 months after. Who was pressuring him? Who had access to his financial records?" Patricia's expression shifted. "You know about the testimony." "I know everything," Amelia said. "I need the pieces I'm missing." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the table, at her coffee, at the door. Then she said, "There was a man who came around after it happened. Not from Greco directly, from someone else. Someone who used the situation. Someone who understood that your father was now vulnerable and decided to capitalize on it independently." Amelia leaned forward. "What was his name?" Patricia hesitated. "I only heard it once," she said. "Your father mentioned it to me the week before I left that job. He said a man named Whitmore had been to see him, that he'd been offered a way out of the debt, but the price was information. Information about a shipment. Something Whitmore needed to intercept." She shook her head. "I don't know what the shipment was. Your father wouldn't tell me, but he said he refused, and that he thought refusing was going to cost him." Amelia's mind was moving fast. Whitmore, not Greco. Someone else. Someone who had used Greco's attack on her father as an opportunity to build his own leverage. "Did my father say anything else about Whitmore?" she said. "Anything about where he worked, who he was connected to?" Patricia looked up. He said one thing, she said carefully. He said that what scared him most about Whitmore was that the man worked in a place where nobody would ever suspect him. She paused. He said Whitmore was a judge. Amelia drove back to the mansion in a car. She still wasn't comfortable calling hers, and sat with that word the entire way. Judge. A judge had manufactured her father's debt. A judge was sitting somewhere in this city, in a position of power and legitimacy, completely protected by the authority of his office, and had spent decades crushing a man's life because her father had refused to give him what he wanted. She walked into the house and went straight to Leonardo's study without taking off her coat. He took one look at her face. "What happened?" he said. She told him, every word. When she finished, the study was very quiet. Leonardo's expression had not changed through her entire account, but his eyes had done something she hadn't seen before. They'd gone absolutely flat. Not cold exactly, more like the stillness of something that has been waiting a long time and has finally received confirmation that the wait is over. "Whitmore," he said. "You know the name." "I've heard it," he said. "In passing. Never with anything attached to it. Never with enough to—" He stopped. "A judge. That's why he was untouchable." "Who is he?" Amelia said. "Do you know which judge?" "Not yet," Leonardo said. "But I will." He reached for his phone. "Leonardo." She put her hand on his arm. He stopped. They both looked at her hand on his arm, and she didn't move it. We don't go after him until we have everything. No half measures, no pressure campaigns. Everything, every document, every thread. Because the moment he knows we're coming, whatever protection he has goes up, and we lose the chance." Leonardo looked at her hand, then at her face. "You sound like someone who's done this before," he said. "I sound like someone who's watched people destroy things by moving too fast," she said. "Including my father." He nodded slowly. "Everything," he said. "We gather everything." She let go of his arm. She didn't know which of them noticed first that she'd been holding it for longer than she meant to. The following 2 weeks were a different kind of dangerous. Not dramatic. Not confrontational. The slow, careful work of pulling threads without unraveling everything. Leonardo had contacts who could pull court records, financial disclosures, case histories. Amelia was going through them every night at the kitchen table, cross-referencing dates, names, case numbers against what she knew of her father's timeline. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, they started having dinner together differently. Not at the long formal table, at the kitchen table. At first it was practical. They were working, and the kitchen was where she was working, and he came in to review something and stayed. Then it became a habit neither of them named. She cooked sometimes. Not because anyone asked her to, but because cooking was something she'd always done to manage anxiety, and she was anxious almost all the time, so she cooked. She made simple things, real things, the kind of food that didn't require a presentation. The first night she put a bowl of pasta in front of him like it was nothing. Leonardo stared at it for the moment. "Helen usually," he started. "Helen makes food for a photograph," Amelia said. "This is food for a person. Eat it." He ate it. After a moment of silence, he said, "This is better." "I know," she said. "Don't tell Helen." "I won't." They ate in comfortable quiet, and it was so ordinary and so unlikely that if either of them had thought too carefully about it, it would have scared them both. So neither of them thought about it. They just ate. Marco's next move came on a Wednesday. Amelia was coming back from a meeting with one of Leonardo's lawyers when she found Marco in the front hallway of the mansion, standing with 2 men she didn't know wearing an expression that told her he'd been waiting. "Mrs. Valenti," he said. "Just the person." She kept walking. "I'm busy, Marco. This won't take long." He stepped sideways slightly, not blocking her path directly, but making it clear he'd prefer she stopped. "I've been hearing things. About you making inquiries. About you asking questions around the city that have nothing to do with the family's legitimate business." She stopped. She turned. She looked at him very carefully. "What kind of things?" she said. "The kind of things that concern me," he said. "The kind that could make certain people nervous. People who don't deal well with nervousness." He tilted his head. I'm asking you as someone who wants to protect this family to be careful about the doors you knock on. She held his gaze for a long moment. Thank you for your concern, she said. She walked past him. Her heart was hammering. Because Marco knowing about her inquiries meant one of two things. Either he had someone watching her, or he was connected to the people she was asking about. She didn't know yet which one was worse. She went upstairs, closed the door to her room, and sat on the edge of the bed with her hands in her lap, breathing slowly, thinking, clearly, refusing to panic. Then she picked up her phone and called Leonardo. Marco knows, she said when he answered. 3 seconds of silence. Are you safe? He said. She noticed that was his first question. Not what does he know or what did he say. Are you safe? Yes, she said. But we have a problem. I'm on my way back, he said. Don't speak to anyone in the house until I get there. She held the phone for a moment after he hung up. She thought about the way he'd said her name in his study that first night. The care in it. The weight. She thought about a man who had spent 30 years trying to repay a debt to a man who was already dead. She thought about how nobody had ever asked her if she was safe before. Not like that. Not first. She stood up. She went to the window. Outside, the city moved on, enormous and indifferent, full of people who didn't know that a 26-year-old woman was standing in a room that wasn't hers, in a life she hadn't planned. Holding on to a secret that could bring down a judge, and slowly, so slowly, she hadn't noticed it happening, beginning to trust the most dangerous man she'd ever met. And the terrifying part, he was trusting her back. Leonardo got back to the house in 22 minutes. Amelia knew because she counted. She was in the kitchen when she heard the front door, and she stood up before he even reached the hallway. He came in fast, not running, but moving with the kind of controlled urgency that told her he'd been thinking the entire drive back, working through every angle, every possibility. He looked at her first. The way he'd asked on the phone, "Are you safe?" was the same way he looked at her now. Checking. Making sure the answer he'd been given was still true. Tell me exactly what he said, Leonardo said. Word for word. She did. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat down, which surprised her because he usually stood when he was thinking. Sitting meant he was settling in. Settling in meant it was more serious than she wanted it to be. He knows about Patricia Hale, Leonardo said. That's my guess. Which means he has someone watching your movements. Or Patricia has been under surveillance for longer than we realized. He pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. Or both. There's a third option, Amelia said. He looked at her. Marco might already know about Whitmore, she said. Not from following me. From before. He might have known for years and never said anything to you. The room held that possibility between them for a moment. It was a large and ugly possibility. Why would Marco protect a judge who destroyed your father? He said carefully. I don't know, she said. But you said yourself that Marco's been building alliances outside the family. People who'd support him taking over. What if Whitmore is one of those people? What if the protection goes both ways? Whitmore stays untouchable. Marco gets an ally with judicial access, and neither of them wanted me finding the connection. Leonardo's voice had gone very quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. Marco didn't warn me off because he was protecting the family, Amelia said. He warned me off because I was getting close to something that protects him. Leonardo stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to her, and she could see it in his shoulders. The specific tension of a man recalibrating everything he thought he knew about the people closest to him. He's my blood, Leonardo said. I know. He grew up in this house. I know. I paid for his education. I gave him responsibility. I trusted him with... He stopped. Amelia didn't say anything. She understood that some realizations had to be arrived at without help. That the moment between knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your body was a moment that belonged only to the person going through it. She waited. Finally, Leonardo turned around. His face was composed, controlled, but his eyes held something she hadn't seen in them before. Grief. All right, he said. We treat Marco as compromised until we know otherwise. Nothing goes through him. Nothing that touches this investigation. Nothing that touches you. He doesn't know what we know. As far as he's concerned, his warning landed and you pulled back. And me, she said. Do I keep going? More carefully, he said. With backup you don't know about. I'll have someone on you when you move and they won't be visible. You won't know they're there, and neither will Marco. She nodded. There's something else, she said. He waited. Patricia mentioned a shipment, something Whitmore wanted to intercept, something my father refused to give him information about. She paused. We've been focused on the debt and the testimony. But the shipment, that's the original leverage. If we can find out what it was, we might find out how deep Whitmore's operation actually goes. Because it wasn't just about hurting my father. He wanted something specific. Leonardo looked at her for a long moment. You're thinking like someone who's been doing this for years, he said. I'm thinking like someone whose father lost everything, she said. I want to understand all of it. Not just enough to stop it. All of it. He nodded slowly. I know someone who might have records from that period, he said. Old logistics contacts. People who tracked movement in and out of the Port Authority 30 years ago. It won't be clean or simple. Nothing about this is clean or simple, she said. He almost smiled. No, he said. It really isn't. The next morning came with a tension that had a different texture than usual. Because Victoria Valenti arrived unannounced at 8 o'clock, walked into the dining room where Amelia was eating breakfast alone, and placed a folder on the table in front of her without sitting down. I need you to look at something, Victoria said. Amelia looked at the folder. Then at Victoria. The usual coldness was still there, but beneath it was something else. Something that looked, if Amelia was reading it correctly, like controlled fear. Sit down, Amelia said. Victoria sat. Amelia opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, account numbers she didn't recognize, and wire transfers, significant ones from one of the family's holding companies, to an account flagged at the bottom of the page with a name. Robert Whitmore. Amelia kept her face completely still. Where did you get this? She said. I have access to accounts Marco doesn't know about, Victoria said. My father set them up years ago as a check against exactly this kind of situation. Marco has been siphoning from one of the legitimate holdings for 8 months. I thought it was just him positioning assets for a future takeover attempt. She pointed at the Whitmore transfers. These started 4 months ago. I don't know who this person is. But the amounts and the frequency, this isn't business. This is payment. Amelia closed the folder. She looked at Victoria Valenti, a woman who had called her a gold digger, who had looked at her like she was something disposable, who had made the first months of this arrangement harder than they needed to be. And she made a decision. Whitmore is a judge, she said. He's been connected to your family without your father knowing. He and Marco have been protecting each other. Victoria went completely white, not dramatically, not with a gasp. Just the blood left her face in the quiet, irrefutable way it does when someone hears a truth they'd been hoping wasn't true. For how long? She said. We're still finding out, Amelia said. But the connection goes back further than 4 months. The payments are just the recent layer. Victoria was quiet. Then she said something Amelia hadn't expected. I owe you an apology. Amelia looked at her. I decided what you were before I knew you, Victoria said. I decided you were here to take something. I was wrong. She paused. You're here trying to give something back. I understand that now. It was the most human thing Amelia had ever heard Leonardo's daughter say. Keep this folder, Amelia said. Tell no one you showed me. Can you act normally around Marco? I've been performing normalcy around powerful men my entire life, Victoria said evenly. Yes. Good, Amelia said. Give me 72 hours. She gave Leonardo the folder that afternoon. He held the bank statements and read them the way he read everything, methodically, silently, without visible reaction. But his hands, Amelia noticed, were very still, the kind of stillness that was its own reaction. Victoria brought this to you, he said. She did. Not to me. She came to me, Amelia said carefully. I think she wasn't sure how you would react. About Marco. Leonardo set the folder on his desk. He turned his chair and looked at the wall. Amelia waited. I have a son-in-law I don't trust, he said finally. A nephew who may be working against everything I've built. A judge who's been operating inside my blind spots for 30 years. And a woman I married to provide a legal fiction who has in 6 weeks done more useful work than anyone in this family has done in years. Don't give me too much credit, she said. I have a personal stake in this. So do I, he said. That never made me effective. He turned back to face her. It made me patient. Too patient, maybe. Patient in the wrong direction. You were protecting people, she said. Even when they didn't deserve it. Marco didn't deserve it. No. But the instinct protecting people, that's not a flaw. She met his eyes. It's the only thing that makes any of this worth doing. He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his expression was changing. Had been changing, she realized, for weeks. Layer by the careful distance he maintained around himself was developing cracks. Not structural failures, more like light finding its way through. We need to find the shipment, he said. Yes. I made a call this morning. The man I mentioned, the old logistics contact. He's agreed to meet, but not here, and not in the city. Where? 2 hours north, a town called Millfield. He retired there. Leonardo looked at her steadily. I'd like you to come with me. Amelia nodded. When? Tomorrow morning. I'll be ready at 6, she said. They drove in near silence for the first hour. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind that exists between two people who have learned they don't need to fill space with words. Amelia watched the city recede behind them and felt for the first time in months like she could breathe at a normal rate. Can I ask you something personal? She said. He glanced at her briefly. You can ask. Your wife, she said. Your daughter's mother. What was she like? A pause. Stubborn, he said. Funny. Completely unimpressed by everything I tried to use to impress her. He was quiet for a moment. She died 17 years ago. Illness. It was fast. I'm sorry. She told me at the end that I had spent our marriage being afraid to need anyone, that I'd held everyone at a distance because I'd convinced myself it was protection, and it was actually just fear. He kept his eyes on the road. She said it without bitterness. That was the hardest part. She wasn't angry. She just wanted me to know before she couldn't tell me anymore. Amelia looked at his profile. Did you change after she died? I thought I would, he said. I didn't. You don't change because someone tells you the truth. You change when you run out of reasons not to. What does that feel like? She said. Running out of reasons. He glanced at her again. Like this, he said quietly. She looked at the road ahead. Neither of them said anything else for a while. But something had been spoken that wouldn't unspeak itself. The man in Millfield was named Gerald Pruitt, 73 years old, former Port Authority logistics supervisor. He met them at his kitchen table with black coffee and the kind of watchful stillness that told Amelia he'd once known exactly how much things were worth keeping track of. He looked at Leonardo, nodded once. Then he looked at Amelia longer. You're Daniel Carter's girl, he said. She went still. You knew my father. I worked 2 blocks from him for 6 years, Gerald said. He was a good man, better than the situation he ended up in. He looked at Leonardo. You're finally moving on this. We need to know about the shipment, Leonardo said. 30 years ago, what Whitmore was trying to intercept. Gerald wrapped both hands around his mug. I was afraid you'd find your way here eventually, he said. I'm not sure whether I'm relieved or scared. Both is fine, Amelia said. Just tell us. Gerald looked at her. Something in his expression softened. Your father's testimony didn't just save Leonardo Valenti, Gerald said. It accidentally exposed a piece of a much larger operation. Greco's network wasn't just criminal, it was running intelligence. Documents. Information the government didn't know was moving through this city's port authority. Amelia frowned. What kind of information? The kind that connected certain powerful people to things they couldn't afford to be connected to publicly, Gerald said. Names on lists, financial trails, the architecture of arrangements between people who were supposed to be enemies. He paused. Whitmore wasn't just a corrupt judge. He was a clearinghouse. He knew which information was moving, he knew which parties wanted it suppressed, and he facilitated the suppression in exchange for protection and money. Leonardo leaned forward. And my father stumbled into this because, Amelia started. Because one of the documents that was supposed to move through that network in the month after the Greco investigation, one that Whitmore desperately needed to suppress, was flagged by your father during a routine filing audit at his firm, Gerald said. He didn't know what it was. He just knew it was misfiled and set it aside to be reviewed. He didn't even open it fully. Gerald shook his head. But Whitmore didn't know that. Whitmore assumed Daniel Carter had read the document and understood what it contained. So when Whitmore approached him demanding the document be handed over and forgotten, your father told him he didn't have it. Because he'd already filed it correctly into the system it belonged in before he understood why it mattered. The kitchen was absolutely silent. Amelia felt something cold move through her chest. My father was punished, she said slowly, for something he didn't even do. For something he didn't even know he was doing, Gerald said. He filed a document correctly, that's all. That's the entire crime in Whitmore's mind. She looked at her hands. Her father had been a careful, honest accountant who did his job correctly. He filed a document in the right place. He told the truth about a meeting he witnessed. He refused to give information to a man who frightened him. 3 acts of basic integrity. And they had cost him everything. They had cost her everything. She pressed her lips together and breathed through it. Where is the document now? Leonardo said. In the system where Daniel filed it, Gerald said. That's the thing about Whitmore's panic, it was unnecessary. The document went into a federal archive database. Has been sitting there for 30 years. Nobody with the right clearance has gone looking for it because nobody knew to look. He looked at Leonardo. But if someone with the right legal standing filed the right request, it could be pulled, Leonardo said. It would need to be pulled by someone with legitimate standing, Gerald said. Not someone from my world. He looked at Amelia. She understood what he was saying. As Leonardo Valenti's wife, she said, I have legal standing to file certain civil access requests. A family grievance petition, Gerald said. Citing your father's case. Requesting related federal materials as part of a civil review of a flawed prosecution. He nodded. It would take weeks. Whitmore might hear about it. He'd try to block it. But if the filing was done quietly through a legitimate attorney before he realized, he wouldn't be able to stop it in time, Leonardo said. Without tipping his hand about why he wants it stopped, Gerald said. And anything he does to block it creates its own trail. Amelia looked at Leonardo. Leonardo looked at her. We need a lawyer who can't be reached, she said. Someone outside this city. Someone who doesn't have any existing connection to you or to Whitmore. I know someone in Philadelphia, Leonardo said. She owes me nothing, which makes her exactly right for this. Amelia turned back to Gerald. The document, she said. Do you know what's in it? What names? Gerald looked at her steadily. I know one of the names, he said. He said it. The name landed in the room like something thrown from a great height. It was not a name from Leonardo's world. It was not a name from the underground. It was the name of a man who had spent 30 years in public life, who sat on committees, who gave speeches about justice and accountability, who had been until approximately 45 seconds ago completely beyond suspicion. Amelia looked at Leonardo. His expression was completely unreadable. Then he said very quietly, That's why Whitmore has stayed protected this long. Nobody goes after a judge who's backed by that man, Gerald said. Nobody has the combination of standing and knowledge and frankly courage to do it. He looked at Amelia when he said that last word. She didn't look away. Thank you, she said, for telling us. Thank your father, Gerald said. He planted the seed. He just never got to see it grow. The drive back was nothing like the drive up. They were 40 minutes from the city when Leonardo said, We have to be careful about how we move from here. Careful doesn't mean slow, Amelia said. No, but it means deliberate. He glanced at her. If Whitmore has the backing we now know he has the moment we file that petition, a clock starts. We need to be ready before we start it. What does ready look like? It means we need to deal with Marco first, he said. He can't be inside the house when this moves forward. He'll feed information before we can stop him. How do you deal with him? She said. Leonardo was quiet for a moment. I call him in, he said. I give him what he's been wanting. I tell him I'm considering stepping back from certain operations, that I want to discuss a formal transition of some responsibilities. He paused. It'll keep him occupied and confident. Confident people make mistakes. Amelia considered that. You'd do that, she said. Offer him something you don't intend to give him. I'd give him enough truth to make the lie convincing, he said. I am stepping back from certain things. That part is real. He glanced at her briefly. Some of what I've been holding on to for the wrong reasons. She didn't ask him to clarify. She understood him well enough by now. They were quiet for a while. The city lights were beginning to appear on the horizon when Amelia said, when this is over, when we have the document and the filing and everything that comes after what happens to you. He didn't answer immediately. There will be consequences, he said. Exposure creates exposure. When I move against people of this level, it won't stay clean. Things about my world will come out as well. Are you prepared for that? I've been prepared for it for 30 years, he said. I've been waiting until I had a reason worth the cost. She looked at him. He kept his eyes on the road. Your father saved my life, he said. He saved it, and then watched his own come apart. I was too slow and too cautious and too focused on protecting what I had built, instead of protecting the person who deserved protecting. His hands tightened slightly on the wheel. I won't be too slow again. Amelia felt the sentence settle into her like something finding its proper weight. She had spent 6 weeks inside a world she hadn't chosen. She had been afraid and furious, and more than once on the edge of walking away from all of it. She had signed a contract because she had no choice, and then discovered that inside the contract was a story that explained her entire life. She had hated him briefly. She had distrusted him for longer. She had argued with him and challenged him and forced him to see things he'd been avoiding. And somewhere in all of that, without planning it, without noticing exactly when it began, she had started caring what happened to him. Not because he was powerful, not because of any contract or agreement or arrangement, because underneath all of it, underneath the mansion and the organization and the decades of hard choices, was a man who had been carrying a debt he considered sacred and honoring it even when it cost him everything. That was who her father had saved, and that was who she was now fighting beside. She looked out the window. The city was getting closer. So was everything that was coming, and for the first time since the night she'd signed a document at a private table with a man she barely knew. Amelia Carter was not afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. What she was not ready for was what was waiting for them when they got back. Leonardo pulled through the gate, and the car had barely stopped when Helen came out the front door. Helen, who never came to the front door, who maintained the kind of professional stillness that suggested nothing in the world could move her urgently. She was moving urgently now. Leonardo was out of the car before Amelia had her door open. What happened? He said. Helen looked at him, then at Amelia. Someone went through Mrs. Valenti's room, she said, while you were away. The documents she keeps in her desk. Amelia was already moving past both of them. She took the stairs 2 at a time. Her room, her desk, the drawer where she kept the notes she'd been compiling, the timeline, the names, the connections between her father's case and Whitmore, and everything Gerald had just confirmed. The drawer was closed. She opened it. Everything looked exactly as she'd left it. She stood there for a second, confused. Then she realized. She hadn't left it that way. The papers were in the same order, but the order was wrong, close, very close. But the note she'd been writing 3 days ago, which she'd left on top because she hadn't finished it, was now second from the top. Someone had been through everything, and then put it back almost perfectly. She turned around. Leonardo was in the doorway. He looked at her face and understood immediately. It's been searched, she said. Is anything missing? She looked at the desk again, thought carefully. "No," she said. "Nothing's missing." Leonardo's expression shifted into something calculated and dangerous. "They weren't looking to take anything," he said. "They were confirming what we know," she said. Their eyes met across the room. "We're out of time," Amelia said. "Whatever we're going to do, we have to do it now, before they move first." Leonardo looked at her. In 27 years of running an organization built on patience and careful timing, Leonardo Valenti had learned to never act before he was fully ready. He looked at the woman standing in the middle of the room that was hers, a room in a house she hadn't chosen, fighting for a father she'd lost, standing straight and certain and completely unbroken. "Call the lawyer in Philadelphia," he said. "Tonight." "Tonight," she said. He stepped back from the doorway, and the clock that had been building toward this moment for 30 years finally irrevocably began to run. The call to Philadelphia took 11 minutes. Amelia sat at the kitchen named Claire Shen, whom Leonardo had described only as precise and incorruptible on speaker between them. Claire listened without interrupting. When Amelia finished laying out the framework of the petition, Claire was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "If the document is where you say it is, and the filing is structured correctly, the archive request goes through a federal channel that Whitmore can't touch directly," Claire said. "He can try to flag it through back channels, but that creates a record. Any interference he attempts becomes evidence of consciousness of guilt." "How long from filing to access?" Leonardo said. "Legitimate processing 3 to 4 weeks. If someone tries to slow roll it from inside the system, potentially 6. But the filing timestamp is immutable. The moment it goes in, it's in." "File it tomorrow," Amelia said. A brief pause. "There are risks to that timeline," Claire said. "If they already know you're moving." "They already know," Amelia said. "Someone went through my room today. We don't have weeks to prepare. We have hours." Another pause, shorter this time. "I'll need everything by 6 a.m., Claire said. "Your father's case number, the original complaint, filing your marriage certificate, establishing legal standing, and a written summary of the civil grievance claim." "You'll have it by 4, Amelia said. She hung up. Leonardo looked at her across the table. 4 a.m., he said. "I work fast when I'm angry," she said. She pulled the notepad toward her and started writing. They worked through the night, not side by side, romantically. Not the way stories sometimes make those moments sound. It was 2 people at a kitchen table with documents spread between them and cold coffee going undrunk, building an argument out of facts and dates and legal language while the house slept around them. Leonardo pulled files she didn't know existed. Decades-old correspondence. Case numbers. The paper trail of a man's reputation being methodically dismantled over years. Amelia organized it into a coherent narrative, chronological and precise, the way her father had taught her to read contracts backward, from the conclusion, to find where the manipulation began. At 2 in the morning, Leonardo put a hand on the document she was working on and said, "Eat something." "I'm fine. You've been writing for 3 hours without stopping." "I'll eat when it's done." "Amelia." His voice was quiet, but it had that quality she'd learned to recognize, the one that wasn't a command, but wasn't quite a request either. The one that meant he was genuinely concerned and didn't entirely know how to say it. She looked up. He had already put bread and cheese and sliced fruit on a plate and slid it across the table without ceremony, the way she'd slid pasta in front of him weeks ago. She looked at the plate, then at him. "You remembered," she said. "You told me food is for a person," he said. "Eat." She ate. He went back to the files. And in the kitchen of a mansion that still didn't feel like home in the middle of the night before everything changed, Amelia Carter realized that somewhere between the contract and the investigation, and 100 small moments she hadn't cataloged carefully enough, Leonardo Valenti had learned how to take care of her the way she'd been taking care of everyone else for years. She didn't say anything about it. She just ate and kept working, and sent everything to Claire Shen at 3:57 a.m. The filing went in at 9:14 the next morning. Claire sent a single text. "Done. Clock starts now." Amelia read it standing in the hallway outside her room. She read it twice. Then she walked downstairs, found Leonardo in his study, and showed him the phone. He read it. He nodded once. "Now we wait," he said. "Now we wait," she agreed. Waiting, as it turned out, was its own kind of violence. The first 48 hours were quiet, in the way a sky goes quiet before a storm. Not peaceful, but pressurized. Amelia moved through the house normally. She attended the meetings Leonardo included her in. She had dinner with him each night at the small kitchen table. She talked to her mother on the phone every evening, keeping her voice light and unremarkable, saying nothing about any of it. Rosa Carter asked her on the second night, "Are you happy there?" Amelia looked at the wall. "It's complicated," she said. "Complicated isn't the same as unhappy," Rosa said. "No," Amelia agreed. "It isn't." She thought about that after she hung up, sat with the distinction. Because it was true, she was not unhappy. She was tense and tired and operating under a level of pressure she'd never experienced before. But underneath all of that was something she hadn't expected to find inside this arrangement. Purpose. She had spent 6 years working 2 jobs to survive, and it had never felt like this, like she was in exactly the right place, doing exactly the right thing, with exactly the right person beside her. That last thought scared her enough that she put it away and didn't look at it again. Not yet. Marco made his move on the third day. He came to the house mid-morning with a document in his hand and a look on his face that was trying to be neutral and wasn't quite managing it. He asked for a private meeting with Leonardo. Leonardo agreed. He directed Marco to the study and told Amelia with a glance, just a glance, to stay close. She sat in the hallway outside the study door and she listened. "I think it's time we formalize the transition plan," Marco said. His voice carried clearly through the old door. "I've prepared a restructuring proposal, transfer of operational authority over the Eastern Holdings with a phased handover of Marco." Leonardo's voice was pleasant. "Sit down." A pause. "I'm already sitting." "Then stop performing and talk to me like family." A longer pause. "I am talking to you like family," Marco said. "I'm talking to you about the future of this family which you've been avoiding." "I've been avoiding nothing," Leonardo said. "I've been watching. There's a difference." Another pause. "How long have you known Robert Whitmore?" The silence that followed lasted 4 full seconds. Amelia counted. "I don't know what you're—" "How long, Marco?" "That name doesn't—" "The wire transfers from the Bellini holding account, Marco. 4 months of them. Shall I read you the amounts, or do you already know them by heart?" The silence this time was different. It had a different weight to it. The weight of a man recalculating everything in real time, what was known, what could be denied, what was already lost. "Victoria gave you that," Marco said. His voice had changed. The performance was gone. "Victoria is loyal to this family," Leonardo said. "Which is more than I can say for you at this moment." "I was protecting the family," Marco said, and there was something almost genuine in it. The specific self-delusion of someone who has been telling himself a comfortable story for so long, it no longer feels like a lie. "Whitmore has connections that could have benefited everyone. I was building a relationship. You were building your own position," Leonardo said. "Using family money to buy protection from a man who spent 30 years destroying innocent people. That's not a relationship. That's a transaction. And the currency was other people's suffering." A chair scraped. "You don't understand the world you're operating in anymore," Marco said. His voice had gone hard. "You've been distracted. By her. By whatever this investigation is that you think you're running without anyone noticing. You're exposing the family to—" "The family," Leonardo said, "is not at risk from the truth. The truth only threatens people who built themselves on lies." "I'll go to the board," Marco said. "I have support, more than you think." "I know exactly how much support you have," Leonardo said. "I also know that in approximately 3 weeks a federal archive document is going to become accessible through a civil petition that will make Robert Whitmore's position untenable. And everyone who has taken his money or done him favors will be reviewed as part of that process." A pause. "You should think carefully about where you want to be standing when that happens." Another silence. When Marco spoke again, the hardness was gone. In its place was something colder and more dangerous, the sound of someone making a decision. "You've made a mistake," Marco said quietly. He left. The front door closed. Amelia was in the study doorway before the sound finished echoing. Leonardo was sitting at his desk, looking at the surface of it. "He's going to Whitmore," she said. "Yes. Tonight. Probably within the hour," Leonardo said. He looked up. "Which is what I needed him to do." She stared. "You wanted him to go." "I needed Whitmore to know the petition exists," he said. "But I needed him to hear it from Marco, not from us. Because when Whitmore reacts, and he will react fast tonight, the reaction will be traceable. He'll make calls, he'll pressure people, he'll try to access the archive system to block the filing." He paused. "And every one of those moves creates a record that validates everything Gerald told us." Amelia stood in the doorway looking at him. "You've been 10 steps ahead of this," she said. "I've been trying to be," he said. "I'm not always. You let Marco walk into your study and threaten you, and you used it." "I gave him exactly enough rope," he said. She shook her head slowly. "Does it bother you?" she said. "Doing that to someone you raised?" The question landed differently than she intended it. More honestly. Leonardo was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "Very much." He looked at his hands. "But what he's been part of, what Whitmore did to your father, what it did to your family, that bothers me more." She held his gaze. She believed him. Whitmore moved fast. Claire called at 9 that evening. 3 separate requests were filed today to delay or reroute the archive access petition, she said. 2 from anonymous parties, 1 under a judicial review claim signed by a sitting judge. It's aggressive. It's also slightly panicked, which is interesting because a panicked block is a messier block. We can fight all 3. She paused. "But there's something else." "Tell me," Amelia said. "The judicial review was signed by the same judge who dismissed your father's case 30 years ago. The judge who, according to your documentation, was on Greco's payroll." Amelia closed her eyes briefly. "He's still on the bench," she said. "Technically retired, but serving in an advisory capacity," Claire said. "Which still gives him the standing to sign the review." A pause. "Amelia, what you're dealing with is not just a corrupt judge and a criminal network. This is an infrastructure. People placed in positions over decades. This is going to get bigger before it gets smaller." "I know," Amelia said. "You need a federal contact," Claire said. "Someone above Whitmore's reach. Someone who can take the petition and the blocking attempts and the financial records and build a case that doesn't go through any of the channels Whitmore controls." Amelia looked at Leonardo across the room. He was already looking at her. "Do you have someone?" she said to him. He stood up. "There's a man," he said. "I've avoided him for 20 years, on principle, because going to him would mean admitting I needed help I couldn't provide myself." "Tonight is not the night for principles," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. "It isn't." The federal contact's name was Agent Thomas Reardon. How was not someone, Leonardo called lightly. He was the kind of man who existed at the intersection of institutional power and personal integrity. Rare enough to be valuable, careful enough to be trustworthy, and experienced enough to know exactly what he was looking at. When Leonardo laid everything on the table in a phone call that lasted 45 minutes, Amelia sat beside Leonardo through the whole call and answered Reardon's questions directly when they were directed at her. Her father's name, the timeline, the document, Whitmore. The name Gerald had given them, the powerful public figure whose connection to Whitmore had kept everything suppressed. When she said that name, Reardon went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How confident are you in the source?" "Completely," she said. "The document in the Federal Archive, if it says what you believe it says, it will," she said. "That's going to open a case that goes well beyond Robert Whitmore," Reardon said. "Good," Amelia said. Leonardo looked at her when she said that. She could feel it. She kept her eyes on the middle distance, and her voice steady. "What I want," she said into the phone, "is for my father's name to be formally cleared as part of whatever case you build. I want documentation, official documentation, establishing that Daniel Carter was not a failed man or a dishonest man. He was a man who was targeted for doing the right thing. I want that on record. If the archive document is what you say it is, Reardon said, clearing your father's name is not just possible, it's unavoidable. The evidence of the setup against him would be embedded in the same materials. She breathed in, breathed out. Then let's get it done, she said. The next 72 hours moved the way serious things move, not dramatically, but with the grinding, inexorable momentum of institutional machinery that has been properly aimed and released. Reardon worked from his end. Claire worked from hers. The archive petition moved forward under federal protection, now insulated from the blocking attempts Whitmore had deployed. And inside the mansion, something else was happening. The tension that had been building for weeks was starting slowly to release. Not all of it, there was still too much in motion, too much uncertain. But the specific dread of moving blindly, of not knowing what was coming, that was lifting. They had made their moves. The clock was running in their direction now. Leonardo, for the first time in weeks, slept through the night. Amelia knew because she heard his study door close at 11 instead of at 2 in the morning, and it didn't open again until 7. She stood in the kitchen at 6 a.m. making coffee and thought about what that meant. A man who had been carrying something for 30 years, finally able to put it down long enough to rest. She thought about her father waking before sunrise to sit at the kitchen table with his contracts, trying to understand a world that was quietly working against him. Not knowing. Never knowing why the walls kept closing in. She thought about how much he would have liked this, not the danger or the complexity, but the clarity. The moment of seeing clearly who the enemy was, and knowing you had the right weapon. He would have liked that. He had been robbed of it. She was going to get it for him anyway. Leonardo came into the kitchen at 7:10 and stopped when he saw her face. "What happened?" he said immediately. "Nothing bad," she said. "I was just thinking about my father." He poured his coffee. He sat across from her. He didn't offer empty comfort. He didn't try to fix it. He just sat there, present and quiet, in the way she'd come to understand was his version of saying, "I'm here." "He would have handled all of this better than me," she said. "No," Leonardo said. "He would have been good. You've been extraordinary." She looked at him. He said it the way he said most things that mattered, plainly, without decoration, like stating a fact that didn't require emphasis, because its truth was self-evident. She looked back at her coffee. "Don't make me cry before 8 a.m., she said. "My apologies," he said. But he was very slightly smiling. Victoria came to find Amelia that afternoon. She knocked, which she'd never done before, and she came in with the careful posture of someone who has something to say, and has been rehearsing how to say it. "My brother called me this morning," Victoria said. "Marco. He told me I'd made a mistake going to you with the bank records. He said you'd weaponized them against the family." She paused. "He said my father had lost his judgment." Amelia watched her. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that his definition of the family seemed to exclude everyone in it except himself," Victoria said. "And that if protecting the family meant protecting a man who destroyed innocent people for 30 years, I wasn't interested in that definition." "How did he respond?" "He hung up," Victoria said. A beat of silence. "I want to help," Victoria said. "Whatever is happening, whatever comes next, I want to be part of it. Not watching from the side, actually helping." Amelia looked at her for a moment. This was the same woman who had sat across from her in the garden 6 weeks ago and told her to remember she was temporary. The same woman who had looked at her like something that would eventually need to be removed. People changed. Circumstances changed them. Evidence changed them. "Can you access Marco's personal calendar and communications through the family account systems?" Amelia said. Victoria's chin lifted slightly. "Yes. I need to know everyone he's spoken to in the last 72 hours. Every meeting, every call, every message that went through family channels. He's feeding information to Whitmore, and I need to know exactly what Whitmore knows." Victoria didn't hesitate. "Give me 2 hours," she said. The list Victoria produced was worse than Amelia expected. And better. Worse, because Marco had been thorough. He'd given Whitmore not just the existence of the petition, but Claire's name, the general shape of the federal angle, and the fact that someone was providing insider logistics information. Gerald Pruitt was potentially exposed. Better because Marco had not told Whitmore about Agent Reardon, which meant the most critical piece was still protected. Amelia called Reardon immediately. "Gerald Pruitt needs to be secured," she said. "Marco Valenti has given Whitmore his name. He's at risk." "I can have someone to Millfield within 3 hours," Reardon said. "Do it now," she said. "Please." She hadn't said please that urgently to anyone in years. Reardon moved within the hour. Gerald was relocated to a secure location by that evening, grumbling loudly about the disruption according to the text Claire forwarded from Reardon's assistant. Amelia read the text and felt something unclench in her chest that she hadn't realized was clenched. She reported back to Leonardo. He listened carefully to all of it, the list, Gerald's relocation, what Marco had and hadn't disclosed, and when she finished he said, "Whitmore will push harder now." "I know. He's going to go after the weakest point he can find," Leonardo said. "He doesn't know about Reardon. He can't touch the archive petition anymore without creating more evidence against himself. So he's going to go after something personal." He looked at her steadily. "Your mother." The word hit her like cold water. "He doesn't know about... He knows your name. He knows who you are. He has 30 years of practice finding leverage." Leonardo held her gaze. "She needs to be somewhere safe. Somewhere that can't be connected to you or to me through obvious channels." Amelia was already reaching for her phone. "I have a friend from the clinic," she said. "In another state. My mother likes her. She visited twice last year." "Can your friend host her without knowing why?" "I can tell her my mother needs a change of environment for her health," she said. "It's not even a lie. Her health is failing. A different environment is better for her." "Make the call," Leonardo said. "Tonight." She made the call. Rosa Carter, who asked no questions and trusted her daughter, completely agreed to visit her daughter's friend for a few weeks because Amelia asked her to, in a voice Rosa had learned long ago, meant "This is serious, and I cannot explain it right now." "Are you safe?" Rosa asked. Amelia heard the echo of that question. Who else had asked it first? How it felt to be asked. "I'm safe, Mom," she said. "I promise." "I trust you," Rosa said simply. The call ended. Amelia sat with the phone in her lap for a moment. Then she walked back into the study where Leonardo was waiting. "She's going tomorrow morning," Amelia said. He nodded. Then he said very quietly, "I'm sorry. That she has to be moved. That your life has been disrupted to this degree because of something that was never your fight to begin with." Amelia looked at him. "It became my fight when it became hers," she said. "The moment my father started losing, we all started losing. I just didn't know who to blame." She paused. "Now I know." Leonardo stood up from his desk. He walked toward her and stopped a foot away, closer than they usually stood, and looked at her with an expression that had nothing managed or controlled in it. Just the unmediated thing beneath all of it, whatever it was looking directly at her. "What you've done in the past 6 weeks," he said. "For your father, for your family. What you've been willing to risk." "I haven't done it alone," she said. "No, but you started it. You kept it moving. You made every decision that mattered at the moment it needed to be made." He paused. "I have known a great many capable people. I have never known anyone quite like you." She looked up at him. This was the moment she would think later, when the contract stopped being the realest thing between them. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't said and didn't need to be. She stepped back, not away from him. Just back to somewhere she could breathe properly. "We're not done yet," she said. "No," he agreed. "Save the retrospective for when it's over." "Fair," he said. She turned toward the door. "Leonardo." She stopped. "Yes." "Thank you," he said. "For staying. When you could have left. Every time you could have left." She didn't turn around. "Thank my father," she said. "He taught me that you finish what you start." She walked out, and in the hallway outside his study, with the weight of everything still ahead of her, and the strange, aching warmth of everything behind her. Amelia Carter pressed her back against the wall and stood there for a moment, just breathing. Because in 2 days, maybe 3, the archive document was going to land. Whitmore was going to be exposed. The name behind him was going to be exposed. And Marco Valenti was going to discover what happened when a man burned the loyalty of the only person who had ever truly protected him. The ending was coming. She could feel it the way you feel weather before it arrives, in the pressure of the air, in the way everything goes unnaturally still. She stood in the hallway. She breathed. And she told herself she was ready. What she hadn't accounted for was that the first person to break wasn't Whitmore. It wasn't Marco. It wasn't the public figure whose name had been spoken in Gerald Pruitt's kitchen. It was Victoria Valenti, who called her at 6 the next morning, voice shaking in a way Victoria's voice had never shaken, and said 4 words that sent everything sideways. "They took my father." Amelia was out of bed before Victoria finished the sentence. "What do you mean they took him?" she said. "Where, when?" "An hour ago." Victoria's voice was tight and controlled, in the way of someone holding themselves together through sheer force of will. "He left the house at 5 a.m. He does that sometimes, walks early when he can't sleep. He has a route. He's done it for 20 years. A breath. His security called me at 5:45. He never came back from the walk. His phone goes to voicemail. There are no cameras on the east path he uses. He's just gone." Amelia was already moving down the hallway, phone pressed to her ear. "Did you call Reardon?" she said. "I called you first. Call Reardon right now. Don't call anyone else in the family. Not Marco, not anyone from the organization. Only Reardon. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Do it now. I'll call you back in 5 minutes." She hung up and stood at the top of the stairs for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds of pure, cold fear. The specific fear of someone who understands that the person they are afraid for is not just a business partner or a legal arrangement, but something that has become, without permission, genuinely necessary. Then she moved. She went to Leonardo's room and knocked hard. No answer. She opened the door. Empty. Bed made. Which meant he'd never gone to bed. She turned and went to the study. Empty. She went to the kitchen. Empty. She stood in the center of the kitchen and pressed both hands flat on the table and breathed once, very deliberately, and thought. He'd been taken on his morning walk. An hour ago. Which meant Whitmore had moved last night, planned it, positioned people, waited for the predictable window. Whitmore knew the route because Marco knew the route. Marco had given him that too. Her phone rang. "Reardon, I just got off with Victoria," he said. "I'm mobilizing, but I need you to listen to me carefully." "I'm listening." "This is a pressure move. Whitmore can't stop the archive document anymore. It's in federal custody now, and the processing is automated. He knows that. So this is not about the document. This is about you." "Me. He's using Leonardo to get to you," Reardon said. "He wants you to withdraw. He wants you to contact him directly and agree to pull the petition. Discredit the filing, sign a statement saying you fabricated the civil grievance claim. He'll let Leonardo go if I do that." "That's what he'll offer," Reardon said. "Don't agree to anything. Don't contact Whitmore directly. Don't—" "I know," she said. "Amelia, I mean it. The moment you make contact, you've given him leverage he can use regardless of what you say. Stay." "Reardon." She kept her voice even. "I heard you. I understand. But you need to find him. That's the only thing that matters right now. Find him." "We're working it," he said. "I need an hour." She hung up. She stood in the kitchen for exactly as long as it took to understand that she was not going to get through this hour by standing in the kitchen. Then she sat down, pulled the notepad toward her, and started thinking on paper. Whitmore's communication would come within the hour. That much was certain. A man who had just taken the risk of kidnapping a figure of Leonardo's magnitude was not going to wait around for the other side to make a move. He needed leverage, and leverage only worked if you exercised it. So the question wasn't whether he would make contact. The question was how. Not directly to Amelia. That was too traceable. Not through Marco. Marco was already compromised from Whitmore's perspective, connected too visibly. It would come through something that looked unofficial. A lawyer she didn't know. A mutual contact. Someone who would approach her in a context that gave Whitmore deniability. She wrote it down. Then she wrote down what she knew about the archive document and its current status. In federal custody. Processing automated. Even if she withdrew the civil petition, the document was now accessible to Reardon under a separate investigative channel. Whitmore might not know that yet, which meant his leverage was built on a misunderstanding of how far things had already moved. She wrote that down too. Then she wrote, "What does Whitmore actually have to lose if he doesn't get what he wants?" Everything. The document connected him not just to the destruction of her father's career, but to 30 years of judicial corruption, to the suppression of federal intelligence materials, and to the name Gerald had spoken in that kitchen in Millfield, a name that would detonate on contact with the public record. Whitmore wasn't pressing because he had options. He was pressing because he was out of them. She looked at what she'd written, and then she understood something that changed the entire shape of the situation. He wasn't holding Leonardo because he thought it would work. He was holding Leonardo because he was panicking. Victoria called back at 7:15. "A lawyer contacted me," she said. "Said he was representing a party who wished to remain anonymous. Offered to facilitate a conversation." "Don't respond," Amelia said. "Amelia, don't respond, don't acknowledge, don't send a reply of any kind. That contact is for Reardon to see, not for us to answer." A silence. "He has my father," Victoria said, and for the first time the control in her voice broke slightly. Not complete. This was still Victoria Valenti, but enough that Amelia could hear the fear behind it. Real fear. The kind that lived underneath all the composure and the expensive posture and the lifetime of learning not to show weakness. The fear of losing a parent. Amelia knew that fear. She knew it from the inside out. Victoria, she said, "listen to me. Whitmore is not going to hurt him. Not yet. Not while there's still something he thinks he can get. The moment he hurts Leonardo, he loses his only leverage and gains a criminal charge that makes everything else worse for him. He needs Leonardo unhurt." "You can't know that. I know how men like Whitmore think," she said. "They are at their core risk managers. They destroy people quietly over time using systems and pressure and the slow erosion of everything that matters. They do not take bold, violent action unless they're cornered. And even when they're cornered..." She paused. "Even then, they're looking for the exit." "What's his exit from this?" "That's what we need to figure out," Amelia said. "I'll call you back." She called Reardon. "What if we give Whitmore an exit?" she said. A pause. "Explain. He's panicking. He knows the document is coming. He knows his connection to the public figure is going to be exposed. He's out of protective cover. The only play he has left is leverage, and he knows leverage is temporary." She pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "What if we give him an offer, not the real one, a constructed one, something that looks like a genuine off-ramp? He releases Leonardo, he surrenders through official channels with an agreement to cooperate, and in exchange, certain aspects of the case that relate to other parties stay managed." "Managed," Reardon said. "Controlled, the name specifically, the public-facing component. If Whitmore cooperates fully, the investigative process is handled through proper channels rather than public exposure." "We can't actually promise that," Reardon said. "I know that," she said. "But Whitmore doesn't know what we can and can't promise. He thinks we're operating from a position of limited authority. He doesn't know you're involved at the level you're involved. He thinks he's dealing with a young woman and an aging mafia boss and a Philadelphia lawyer." She paused. "Let him keep thinking that. Long enough for him to take the offer." Reardon was quiet for a moment. "You want to run a controlled deception on a federal judge," he said. "I want to get Leonardo back safely," she said. "And I want Whitmore to surrender himself into federal custody, which he will if he thinks it's a better option than what comes next." Another silence. Longer this time. "It's not how I'd prefer to do this," Reardon said. "Neither would I," she said. But my preference stopped mattering about 40 years ago, when a man took a document out of a misfiled stack and changed everything for everyone he loved. Reardon exhaled. "I'll make the contact," he said. "Through a channel that looks independent. It'll take a couple of hours to set up convincingly." "Do it," she said. She hung up. She sat alone in the kitchen of a mansion that still wasn't hers, and looked at the notepad full of her own handwriting and thought about Leonardo somewhere in this city, in a room she couldn't see, handled by men she didn't know, waiting. She thought about what he would be doing right now. He would be still. He would be quiet. He would be thinking clearly without panic, because he had operated in dangerous situations for 40 years, and he understood that stillness was its own kind of survival. He would also, she suspected, be thinking about her, and that thought was so unexpectedly painful that she had to stand up and move so it couldn't settle on her properly. The response came back through Reardon's constructed channel at 9:40 a.m. Whitmore wanted proof that the petition could be withdrawn. He wanted a signed statement from Amelia. He wanted a direct communication from her voice, not text confirming the offer was genuine. Reardon called her. "He's going to want to hear your voice," he said. "He needs to believe you're acting independently. If he thinks Leonardo's organization is running this, he'll assume it's a trap." "Because it is a trap," she said. "Yes," Reardon said. "But he needs to not know that." Amelia thought for a moment. "What do I say, the truth?" Reardon said. "As much of it as possible, that you're scared, that you want your husband back, that you understand the petition is bigger than you intended and you're not equipped to fight at this level." He paused. "Let him underestimate you." She almost laughed. "That's what everyone does," she said. "Use it one more time," Reardon said. The call lasted 9 minutes. Whitmore's voice was exactly what she'd expected, the measured, authoritative tone of a man who had spent decades making decisions that affected people's lives from behind institutional walls. Reasonable sounding, almost avuncular. The kind of voice designed to make you believe that whatever was happening was actually quite sensible if you just look at it properly. Amelia kept her voice slightly unsteady. Not so much that it was unconvincing, she didn't have to manufacture all of it. She was genuinely afraid, genuinely angry. The trick was letting just enough of that through to sound like a young woman in over her head, without revealing the part underneath where she was thinking 10 steps ahead. "I just want him back," she said. "That's all I want. I'll sign whatever you need. I'll give a statement. I'll make it clear that the filing was premature and the claims were overstated. I just want to know he's safe." "He's perfectly comfortable," Whitmore said. "Can I hear his voice?" A pause. "That can be arranged when we've reached a formal understanding." "Then let's reach one," she said. "Tell me what you need from me." He told her. She agreed to everything. Her voice was the voice of someone who had run out of options. And in the background, Agent Thomas Reardon was recording every syllable, triangulating the call origin, and doing the thing that Whitmore had not accounted for because he thought he was dealing with a frightened young woman who didn't know how the world worked. He wasn't. They found Leonardo at 11:17 a.m., a warehouse on the south edge of the city. Legal on paper, connected through 3 layers of shell entities to a property management company that Reardon's team had traced from the call's origin point in 46 minutes. Amelia heard it from Reardon on the phone. She was sitting on the staircase with her back against the wall and her knees up, and when he said, "We have him, he's unharmed," she pressed her hand over her mouth and held completely still for a long moment. She did not cry. She was not in general a person who cried easily. But she held her hand over her mouth and breathed carefully and felt something enormous pass through her, the way weather passes tremendous and then gone. "He's asking for you," Reardon said. "Tell him I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. She stood up. Victoria was at the bottom of the stairs. She must have been listening. Her eyes were bright with the specific moisture of someone who has been told good news they had stopped completely believing in. "He's safe," Amelia said. Victoria pressed her lips together and nodded once precisely and turned away. Amelia grabbed her jacket and walked out the front door. Reardon's people had Leonardo in a secure vehicle 2 blocks from the warehouse. When Amelia got there and the door opened, Leonardo stepped out, and for a moment they simply looked at each other across the distance between them. How was undamaged? She could see that immediately. Shirt slightly rumpled, expression composed in the way of someone who had spent several hours being very deliberately unafraid. But beneath the composure was something she recognized because she'd been carrying the same thing all morning. The specific relief of seeing a person you'd been afraid of losing. She crossed the distance between them. She didn't say anything. She put her hand on his arm, the same arm she'd gripped without meaning to in his study weeks ago. And this time she didn't let go immediately, and he covered her hand with his briefly, firmly. "You got me out," he said. "Reardon got you out. You built the plan that made it possible," he said. She looked up at him. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Did they threaten?" "They were professionals," he said. "Frightening in a controlled way. Nothing physical." He paused. "I was more concerned about what you were doing than what was happening to me." "You shouldn't have been. I had it." "I know," he said. "That's not the same as not being concerned." She held his gaze, and this time, neither of them looked away first. Whitmore was arrested at 2:17 that afternoon. He came voluntarily, which told Amelia exactly how thoroughly the constructed off-ramp had worked. He had been so certain he was walking into a managed surrender that he walked directly into Reardon's jurisdiction without resistance. By the time he understood what had actually happened, the recording of his phone call with Amelia was already in evidence. The financial records Victoria had produced were already catalogued, and the archive document, which had processed overnight exactly as Reardon had anticipated, had been formally accessed and was being reviewed by federal investigators. The document was everything Gerald Pruitt had said it was, and the name embedded in it was, by evening, no longer protected by 30 years of carefully constructed distance. The calls started coming in that night. Reardon's office. Claire in Philadelphia. 2 journalists who had somehow gotten ahead of an embargo that hadn't been properly placed. The machinery of consequence turning over, picking up speed. Amelia sat in the kitchen and listened to it all from a distance. She felt more than anything tired. The good kind of tired. The kind that lives in the body after something enormous has been completed. Leonardo came in at 9 p.m. and put a cup of tea in front of her without asking whether she wanted it. She picked it up without commenting on the fact that he'd made it. "Marco called," he said, sitting across from her. "What did he say?" "He said he didn't know it would go this far. That he thought Whitmore was just a useful connection. That the warehouse holding me, that he didn't approve that." Leonardo looked at his own hands. "He may even be telling the truth about that last part." "Does it matter?" she said. "Legally, probably. Personally." He paused. He still fed Whitmore the information that made it possible. He still chose his position over everyone else. He was quiet for a moment. "I told him to retain his own attorney. That the family would not be providing legal support." She looked at him. "That was hard," she said, "not a question." "Yes," he said simply. "You did the right thing. I know." He picked up his own cup. "The right thing is frequently the hardest thing. That's how you know it's right." She almost smiled. "My father used to say something like that," she said. "Wise man," Leonardo said. "The wisest I've ever known," she said. "Until recently." She said it looking at her tea. She didn't look up, but she knew from the brief shift in the air that he'd heard it exactly the way she meant it. The formal clearing of Daniel Carter's name came through 22 days later. A document from the federal case, part of the broader proceeding against Whitmore and the parties connected to him, that established officially and irrevocably that Daniel Carter had been the target of a deliberate and sustained campaign of manufactured reputation, destruction, financial sabotage, and criminal framing. That the debt used to pressure his family was fraudulent in its origin. That he had at no point engaged in any of the conduct attributed to him. That he had been by every available measure an honest man. Amelia received the document from Claire by email on a Tuesday morning. She read it 3 times. Then she called her mother. Rosa Carter answered on the second ring, and Amelia told her as clearly and completely as she could manage what the document said, what it meant, what her father actually was, what he had always been, and what had been done to him, and why and by whom and how, all of it had finally come apart. Rosa was quiet for a long time when she finished. Then she said in a voice so composed it broke Amelia's heart, "I always knew." "Mom, I always knew," Rosa said again. "He was never what they made him look like. I knew that. I just couldn't prove it." A pause. "You proved it." "We proved it," Amelia said. "Dad started it." Rosa made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "He would have been so proud of you," she said. "He always was, even when things were hard. He used to say, 'You remember this, Amelia. You have to remember this.' He used to say that you were the kind of person who finishes things." Amelia pressed her hand over her mouth. She held it there until she could trust her voice again. "I remember," she said. The contract's 1-year mark arrived on a Thursday. Amelia woke up knowing the date. She'd known it was coming for weeks, the way you know about a deadline, with a steady awareness in the background that doesn't demand attention but doesn't leave either. She had kept her part of the agreement. Every term, every appearance, every function and meeting and presentation of a united front that Leonardo had needed. She had done all of it, and more than all of it. The debt her family owed was cleared. Her mother's medical expenses were covered. The money that had been promised was in an account with her name on it. She had everything she'd signed for. She stood in her room, the room that had been hers for a year, and had come to feel quietly, and without her quite noticing, like it actually was, and she thought about what came next. She thought about the clinic. She could go back. She could use the money to further her education, become the doctor she'd quietly wanted to be before survival had taken priority over ambition. She could get a real apartment, a real life. The ordinary kind, the kind that didn't involve federal archives and judicial corruption, and a 70-year-old mafia boss who made coffee exactly the way she liked it without ever being told. She thought about all of that. Then she went downstairs. Leonardo was in the study. She knocked. He looked up. "I know what today is," she said. "So do I," he said. She came in and sat across from his desk. The same position she'd been in hundreds of times in the past year, but nothing about it felt the same as it had at the beginning. He reached into the desk drawer. He placed a document in front of her. She recognized it immediately. The original contract. The one she had signed at a private table in an empty restaurant while her hand was shaking. She looked at it. One page had been added at the back. She turned to it. It was short. Single paragraph. Leonardo's handwriting careful and precise. "This marriage began as an agreement between two people with separate needs. All original terms have been met in full. The party of the second part is released from all obligations contained herein, freely and without condition. If she chooses to remain, it will be on no terms but her own, for no reason but her own, and for as long or as briefly as she chooses." She read it twice. Then she looked up at him. "You could have just told me the contract was done," she said. "I could have," he agreed. "Why the addition?" He looked at her steadily. "Because I spent 40 years making agreements with people that were always conditional on something," he said. "I wanted this one to be different. I wanted there to be a record, an actual written record, that I asked for nothing." He paused. "That whatever you decide freely." She looked at the document. She thought about the night she'd signed it, desperate and afraid, and absolutely certain she was making a transaction, not a choice. She thought about the year between that night and this one. The fear and the work and the grief and the strange, unexpected grace of finding someone who could stand beside her while she dismantled 30 years of her family's destruction. Who had learned to make coffee correctly. Who said, "Are you safe?" first. She thought about her father, who had spent his life doing right by people who couldn't protect him. And she thought about the man sitting across from her, who had spent 30 years trying to protect him anyway. Too late, and imperfectly, and without knowing if it would ever be possible, but trying. Staying with it. Because he believed it was owed. That kind of faithfulness was not common. She had not found it anywhere else in her life. She wasn't entirely sure she could find it again if she walked out the door. She looked at him. "I'm not leaving," she said. Something moved through his expression. quick and profound, like light through deep water. "Amelia." "I'm not leaving," she said again. "Not because of the contract. Not because of what you did for my father, or what we did together, or any of the rest of it." She folded her hands on the desk. "Because I don't want to." He was quiet for a moment. "You should know," he said, "that what comes next will still not be simple." "I know." "My world is complicated," she said. "I know that too. I'm 71 years old." "I can count," she said. "I can't promise." "Leonardo." She said his name the way he'd said hers that very first night in the study when everything was just beginning to crack open. With weight. With intention. "I'm not asking for promises. I'm not asking for anything." She met his eyes. "I'm staying because this is where I want to be. That's all." He looked at her for a long time, the kind of look that takes inventory of something precious. Then he said very quietly, "Your father saved my life. And somehow in a way I didn't earn and can't entirely explain, you saved the rest of it." She felt the sentence settle through her like something finally put down in the right place. "You saved mine too," she said. "Just so we're keeping records." He reached across the desk. She put her hand in his. They held on. Not dramatically. Not with speeches or declarations or anything that required performance. Just two people in a room where truth had been spoken and received, where 30 years of a terrible and patient wrong had been unraveled and answered, holding on to each other with the quiet certainty of people who have been through something real and come out the other side, not diminished, but larger. In the weeks that followed, the case against Robert Whitmore moved through the federal system with the steady gravity of things that are correctly aimed and properly evidenced. Two other officials were implicated in the proceedings. The public figure whose name had been spoken in Gerald Pruitt's kitchen announced his retirement from public life for reasons of health. The world reorganized itself around the truth. Slowly. Imperfectly. The way the world always does. Marco Valenti entered a cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors. He received a reduced sentence. He did not return to the house. Victoria in the months that followed became something Amelia hadn't anticipated. Not exactly a friend, but something more substantial than a truce. A colleague. A person who had looked at her initial assumptions and revised them completely, which was, Amelia had come to believe, one of the bravest things a person could do. Gerald Pruitt went back to Millfield. He called Amelia once, 6 weeks later, to ask how things had turned out. She told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your dad would have raised a glass to that." She told him she thought so too. Rosa Carter came back from her friend's house and was given for the first time in years the full story. She sat at her kitchen table and listened to all of it without interrupting. When Amelia finished, Rosa was quiet for a long time. Then she said only this, "Take care of each other." Amelia said they would, and Leonardo Valenti, who had spent 4 decades building walls around everything he cared about, because he had learned that caring for things made you vulnerable to losing them, began carefully and without announcement to put some of those walls down. Not all at once. Not perfectly, but visibly. In the way he stopped working through dinner. In the way he started asking questions that weren't strategic questions about what she was thinking, what she wanted, what she hoped for. In the way he let himself be seen by her without the careful management of every expression. The man she had agreed to marry for a year turned out to be the only person who had ever looked at her full situation. The debt, the jobs, the grief, the quiet years of holding everything together, and decided without hesitation that she was worth fighting alongside. And the woman who had signed a contract with shaking hands, because she had no other choice, turned out to be the only person in 40 years who had looked at Leonardo Valenti, not his power, or his reputation, or his organization, but the man himself, and decided he was worth staying for. Neither of them had planned any of it. That was the thing about real things. You didn't plan them. You just recognized them when they arrived as the thing you'd been needing all along. The woman who had married a 70-year-old mafia boss to pay her debt did not end up with a transaction. She ended up with the truth about her father, a future built on solid ground, and a man who had waited 30 years to keep a promise and who spent the rest of his life making sure she never had to face anything alone again. That was not the deal she signed for. It was something far better. And it began the way all real things do, with a single act of impossible courage, a young woman's shaking hand, a pen, and the decision to trust that even in the darkest agreements, something worth keeping can still be found.